Around the late 90s, my uncle, who we're going to call C, got a house in a town about an hour away from me. He moved in with his girlfriend, now wife, who is my aunt. We're going to call her M. And his son, who is my cousin. When my cousin was around 3 or 4, he was playing in his room normally, but started to talk to somebody who wasn't there. C noticed this and asked him, "Who are you talking to?" To which my cousin responded, "The man." My uncle thought this was just my cousin's wild imagination, being the kid he was, until C and M had a horrifying experience every night. C and M watched the TV in their room before going to bed. They made sure they turned both the TV and the light off. A few hours later, C awoke for an unknown reason, only to realize that the TV and light had somehow turned on by themselves. Now the TV was an older TV, so it couldn't be turned on with a remote. It was the kind where you had to get up to press the button to turn it on. The light was also connected to one of those push-button dimmer switches. Keep in mind that C, M, and my cousin were the only ones living in the house, so there is absolutely no way of turning on these things unless one of them did it. They later brought in a priest who blessed the house with holy water. Nothing happened until years later when they moved into a new house 4 hours away from this house. C&M bought this new house around the late 2000s. In 2011, they had a daughter who we'll call L, who is also my cousin. Their son had moved out by now and was enrolled in a job out of town. Anyway, L was around 1 or 2 years old when she would randomly look up at things that were not there. And pictures of her grandfather, C's dad, who had passed away years before she had been born. As she got older, she never did this anymore. Nothing happened again up until last month. C was using the bathroom in their basement when he suddenly got a strange feeling. He just so happened to glance over at the closed bathroom door, which had a vertical mirror on it. As he looked, he saw a shadow figure staring at him, which then disappeared a few seconds later. My uncle got startled but wasn't frightened. Every time I go over to C&M's house, I stay in the guest room, which is also in their basement. I always have this strange feeling someone is watching me, and it terrifies me to be in the basement alone. I believe this ghost could be C's dad, who, as I mentioned earlier, passed away years earlier. I remember C told me he was a World War II veteran pilot who passed away in the early 90s, I believe. The spirit has never harmed anybody, let alone C, which makes me believe this could be his dad. What I'm about to tell you personally happened to me. Let me start by giving a briefing on this building and why I was there. This building used to be a McDonald's warehouse where they stored and packaged the products to be sent to the locations in the nearby area. It's a fairly large facility and was really long and has 2 floors. The facility turned into a place where parts for cars were shipped out, owned by a small local family. The husband had decided to give the wife a hobby, and so she decided to open a pots and pans store. This is where I came in. I started working for her at her store towards the end of her closing. The brick and mortar didn't work out so well, so she decided to go strictly online, and I followed to the warehouse where she took over the right half of the upstairs building. The left half was for the offices for the husband's business. The middle of the upstairs was at the time a bunch of large dark conference rooms filled with products from the store we just moved from. Now on to the actual story. I am a very detailed-oriented person, so she trusted me with the task completely. After about a month of being there, things were moving along, but we still had a lot left to do. She had a family vacation planned and would be gone for about a month, so I would be left alone there to finish up things. Now, mind you, the upstairs was creepy as hell, and I hated going into this particular conference room because it just gave off this weird vibe. So I was kinda nervous she would be leaving, but just thought, it is only a month, no big deal. Up to this point, nothing really out of the ordinary had happened, so I had no reason to feel this way. The left side of the building had the husband's offices, and they were separated from my side of the building by a long hallway with motion sensor lights and 2 doors. One on my side and one on theirs. Each side had a stairway, so I rarely saw the office girls unless they had to bring something to me. One day I am near the doorway, which is right next to the stairs. I started hearing what sounded like someone walking down the hall, which I thought was odd because the office girls usually leave an hour earlier than this. So I peeked out into the hall and I saw from the left side of the building the motion lights lighting up and coming in my direction with no one I can visibly see, and I could still hear the footsteps. Right before the stairs, it stopped. No sound, nothing. I left early that day. I came back obviously because I couldn't leave my boss hanging while she is on vacation. Sometimes I wonder if I should have just quit earlier. I don't recall at what time this happened, but it was closer to the time of when my boss was coming back home. I had got mostly all needed items stocked on the shelves, neatly organized and labeled. I now was in the process of making an itemized list of everything we had in stock into a spreadsheet. That way when she returned, she knew what she had and how much. I realized at one point that I had seen more of a particular item that I needed to add to the stock, that creepy conference room. I rushed my way down to the room and prayed no one started walking invisibly down the hallway. I quickly ran over to grab the items, and as I bent over, I felt this odd burning sensation on my left shoulder. I ignored it and got the heck out of the room. I got back to what I was doing and forgot about the burning incident until I got home. I went to take a shower and had caught a glance in the mirror of something on my shoulder. It was 3 scratch marks, 2 of them about 2 inches long and 1 about 3 inches. I tried to make sense of it, went back through my day to see when I could have done this to myself, and I could not place a time that this could have happened. About a week later, I am hanging out with 2 of my friends, and we were all talking when I felt this burning feeling on my right forearm. I made a noise of pain and stated my arm was burning. We all looked at my arm and watched 3 scratch marks appear out of nowhere. I did not scratch myself, and up until the marks appeared, there was nothing but my white skin. My oldest son is 8 years old and has an amazing imagination, so for the longest time I disregarded his stories about his room. His room is on the 2nd floor of our house. There is a living room dividing his room from my youngest son's bedroom. Ever since we moved here about 2 years ago, he has been complaining about seeing and hearing things in his room now and again. He gives vivid descriptions of the sounds and creatures, sounds including footsteps, sighs, moving of things. Creatures include a dark owl-like figure sitting outside the window, glowing eyes, claws, and it started growing until it completely covered the window, and just disembodied glowing eyes in the corner of the room. Last night he was terrified and he came downstairs like 5 times, complaining about seeing small lizard-esque animals out of the corner of his eyes, and hearing the sound of a walkie-talkie that nobody is speaking into, like static. So I told him to take our spare mattress and go sleep in his brother's room. Nothing ever happens when he sleeps in there, and he feels safer with someone in the room. After a while, it gets silent up there, and I thought he fell asleep. So about half an hour later, I hear Legos being moved around and some bumps and movement. So I called up the stairs to him to go to sleep. It was late, I was tired, and annoyed. I then start my night routine in the bathroom. There is silence upstairs, so I settle in bed and close my eyes. Not even 5 minutes later, I hear him calling me Mom, and so I decide to finally go up there and calm him down. Turn on some lights. I get up there in the room, and both boys are fast asleep, snoring, open mouths, and drooling. I have a moment of confusion, looking around the room and wondering what the hell. I decide that I was just hearing things and turn around to go downstairs. Standing in the doorway of my youngest son's room, I can see straight into my oldest son's room, and I see creepy glowing eyes in there. I closed the door to the boys, turned my phone's flashlight on, put my brave face on, and walked to the door, only to find an empty room. So I went downstairs, went to bed, and thought about everything else he had seen and heard. I'm going back and forth about what happened last night, but what really gets me is something calling me using my son's voice. I'm scared out of my mind and thinking about telling my husband when he wakes up. But honestly, What the hell is happening in my son's bedroom? My sons went to spend the weekend at their grandparents' house. My husband went to work and I braced myself. That night I went upstairs and took a look around before I went to bed. I made sure to mark my territory by walking into every room, making a round and saying out loud, "This is my house, and this is my son's room. You don't live here anymore." Now some of you would clearly advise against this since I didn't know what was up there or if it was aggressive. But I didn't have sage to burn or time to call in a clairvoyant. I had 2 days until my boys would come home. That night as I went to bed, I turned a little light on in my room. I was trying not to seem scared, but damn the darkness at this point. I lay down in bed and the light blew up. It smelled horrible, and I was in complete darkness. I jumped out of bed and turned on the ceiling lamp, and it blew out too. So I did what any rational person would do. I freaked out and yelled things like, "So you're gonna blow up every lamp in my house? What then? I'm not going anywhere." I marched upstairs in the light of my phone's flashlight and repeated my "this is my house" chant a couple of times until I calmed down and started to wonder if I messed up. My guess is that this thing knew what my intentions were and was pissed that my sons weren't in the house, so it took it out on me. I went downstairs thinking I'm going to be alone in this house until 7:30 in the morning. Shivering at this point, I went into the bedroom to change the light bulbs when I heard the piano in the living room. Just a frustrated smack on the keys and then silence. The house was quiet for the rest of the night. Actually, for the rest of the weekend. We still have experiences, but a lot less than before. The kids stay in their rooms, beds, most nights, and they aren't that scared anymore. I still prance around upstairs once a day, telling this thing to leave my house. It's a game of stubbornness at this point, I think. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, share, subscribe, and click the bell for notifications. And if you have an experience or a story to tell, feel free to email me at the address listed in the description. And remember, hell is empty, and the devils are here.